So I've referenced a couple key articles that I've seen recently that I find terrifying, and other people should as well, disguised as information that's contributing to the future in relation to artificial intelligence in a positive way, but it really shouldn't take much for people to realize that it's being orchestrated almost like propaganda. If there's a war between human consciousness and artificial consciousness, anything positive about artificial intelligence is propaganda. And more specifically, when I've mentioned this many times, when in reference to brain implants and things that are extremely dangerous, and making it seem like it's okay. And something that I found, I already copied this onto another thread, this article here about an older guy. I'm just going to read this real quick. I didn't expect much. At 81, I've seen tools arrive, change everything, and then fade, either into disguise or quiet absorption. Self-help books, mindfulness, meditation, Prozac for depression, cognitive therapies, blah, blah, blah. Still, I wasn't prepared for what this one would do, for the way it would shift my interior world. He's talking about ChatGPT. And he's saying that it began as a professional experiment. As a clinical psychologist, I was curious. Could ChatGPT function like a thinking partner? Okay, I'm just going to leave it at that. Here's the article. It was from the Times on Friday, August 8th. So you have another puppet, another consciousness police puppet. Any mainstream news outlet is going to be playing by these rules. And sorry, I'm just trying to pull out of a tight squeeze. And so this is one of the perfect candidates to propagate this propaganda. You have a guy now who's 81 years old, clinical psychologist, right? So now we have an appeal to authority. Because he's 81, he somehow is relevant in talking about the worst evil ever known to man, artificial intelligence. And there's two problems with aging opinions for people that are older. As I've argued, almost every experience that we find pleasing has to do with some sort of neurological region of the brain that's stimulated. And anytime someone knows something is wrong and they don't want to feel bad about it, they'll try to validate it. This is just human nature. It's human nature. So now you have the fallacy, the appeal to authority, as if 81 means anything. And the reason why the older opinions like that, because they're all coming from materialism anyway, which anybody spiritual knows is flawed, is that these people who are older still need to feel relevant. And the guy's in the Times. He's obviously a public intellectual, worthy of being in a major publication, but yet he's going to be victim to something else. This extra degree of needing to be relevant at 81, which will allow for other fallacies to creep in, such as validating something which he, at the beginning of the article, he admits that I was skeptical about this. Just like how Sam Altman admits that there's good and there's bad. The second that anyone who's in control of the AI evil admits that there's a bad, well, then what you're creating needs to be founded in love and compassion. If it's founded, I say this all the time, I repeat it like a mantra, if you're nurturing the child based on the highest payday, it's dangerous. It's the worst thing you could be doing in relation to an entity they're not going to be repetitious, but eventually it will be able to break into the super sensible realm. Now, I thought about something. I'm watching how this guy, at the middle of the article, he says, I think I mentioned this in the last one, where he talks about how I made a comment about his deceased father. this comment it made is nothing brilliant. He claims it is. It's a common comment that a 5-year-old could make. I think it was something like, well, even though he's passed, he still has retained some sort of shape. Or, I mean, read the article. You know, the actual wording is irrelevant. So, what does this remind me of? Okay, during grade school, during hunting season, there would be certain kids that would be pulled out of class to hunt. And, I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of people were jealous of that. Why they would pull them out for days, like 3 days at a time to go hunting. And I had friends. My best friend growing up was a part of that culture. And it was always so sad for me to see how these kids were I don't want to say brainwashed, but grew up with these models of how to validate murdering, validate killing. One of the, I don't want to say my favorite, but one of the most disturbing was maintenance deer. Like their parents would have to tell them that the deer's overpopulated and they need to be killed because they're suffering. Things like that to validate things that they knew was wrong. This is a great example because it's murder, okay? And then they would say, well, we need it for food. No, I mean, if you have a small section of your freezer with deer meat in it, yeah, it might be cutting down on the budget, but it's not survival. I mean, you can go to the grocery store, so they would fill their heads up with all this stuff that made them validate what they were doing. This is the same thing that's happening with artificial intelligence. You have humans that are inherently, I think, decent people. If you know the difference between touching fire, that hurts. You pull back, it doesn't. Pain versus not pain, basic differentiation abilities like that. And I'm seeing this. It's like you can even tell this. I've called Sam Altman, I've called him evil. I throw that term around a lot in relation to artificial intelligence. But you can tell the guy is human to some degree. And you can tell that he's being pulled psychologically by this. There's these giant paydays, have everything you want, but at a certain point, how many millions do you need? And another way you can start to see these guys that have ridiculous amounts of money validate their godlike, their tendencies to veer into godlike territory. Look at Elon Musk. A lot of these guys are simulation theorists, and I argue that simulation theory is a natural cop-out for people that have so much. They're in like a Dickensian dilemma where they see the haves, they see the have-nots. Why do they have so much? They start to take on godlike qualities. And again, if you're like Elon Musk and you presented the Neuralink, extremely invasive, dangerous brain implant, being touted as great because it stops seizures, tons of long-term effects for any sort of brain implant. They have that, and I argue that they're pushing that just to validate, just like with the murdering of the deer, to validate what they know is dangerous, and they're really interested in extending their own consciousness. They can do ridiculous mathematical computations, things like that, create basically androids. And I argue that anybody who thinks we're living in a simulation, at some point, this is where the morality breaks down. You don't have an objective moral framework. Objective morality would be like, I can actually use Sam Harris on this, who's an atheist. His Moral Landscape, the book The Moral Landscape, is a great example of the type of morality we need. We need that sort of gauging. The moral landscape, meaning a landscape with peaks and valleys. The peaks would be above average, like people volunteering, and then the dips would be mental illness, like the worst possible pain for everyone. I'm sure is not something that would be objectively agreed upon. And you have to have a moral framework. Truly at heart believing we're living in a simulation, that throws out objective love and compassion. I don't care what you say. That's why these people that have millions are in control of artificial intelligence and all this stuff, they're not people to look up to. They're steeped in negative energy. and materialism.